1, 2, 3. Welcome to She Rocked It. This is the place where ladies are talking about the ways we're blazing our trails and the things that put the wind in our sails. Hey, Rockstar. Thanks for tuning into the She Rocked It podcast. I'm your host, Karen Gross. So excited that you're with us and so excited to present part 2 in our series on Real Talk from women in the music industry, which we recorded at the Bridge Recording Studio in Brooklyn. It was an amazing afternoon. And if you haven't listened to part 1 with Emily King, Kim Kalesti, and Maggie Haley, what are you waiting for? Go backwards and listen to part 1 of this incredible conversation. We featured in part 1 amazing performers, musicians in the industry. And in this conversation, we're actually going to highlight women who are off stage in the music industry, but play incredibly important roles. Before we dive in, I have to tell you some statistics that I think you're going to find shocking. So I'm looking right now at the website of She Is the Music, which is a fantastic organization working to empower women in the music industry. And they have some statistics here from the USC Annenberg Inclusion Initiative study released in January 2019. And get this, these are the results from a survey of top songs from 2019. In that survey, only 2.6% of producers credited were women. That's less than 3% of producers on those songs. Also, only 2.6% of the engineers and mixers were women. Again, less than 3%. So we've got some work to do. So today we're going to hear from some of the incredible women who are rocking it in the industry. Despite these very small numbers, they are blazing a trail, and I can't wait to hear their perspective as women in the industry. Today, you're going to hear from Professor Rashida Scott-Cruz, who works in the music industry program at Monmouth University. She's been nominated for a Grammy Museum Music Educator Award, and as a woman of color, she is actively championing for more representation across the music industry. By the way, Monmouth University has been named one of Billboard's top music business schools. You'll also get to hear from Teng Chen, who I am so proud to say works with us here at the She Rocked It podcast. She has been our audio engineer since the beginning to make sure the podcast sounds amazing. And today you're going to get to hear more about how she came from China to New York City to make it in the music business. She's one of the few women working in audio engineering, music editing, music mixing, and she is rocking it. You'll also get to hear today from Stephanie Myers, who's made an amazing name for herself in family entertainment as a publicist, working with some of the best Grammy-winning artists in that genre. She also has experience working on record labels and in other aspects of the music business that she's going to tell you about. I've had the great pleasure of working with Stephanie on the She Rocked It podcast because we featured some of her artists, including Divinity Rocks, Sonia de los Santos, and Nina Freelon. Check those interviews out in season 1. Stephanie is an amazing connector, and she also connected me with Mona Kayhan, who is the co-owner of the Bridge Recording Studio in Brooklyn, where we recorded this episode and our previous episode. It's an amazing space. We had the most incredible time, and Mona and her team were the most incredible hosts. So thank you again. Not only is Mona an amazing studio co-owner, she also has experience as a music marketing consultant and as a seasoned event producer for events including Lollapalooza and Austin City Limits. No big deal, no pressure. She's amazing. You're going to hear more about her experience in the industry. Oh, and I can't forget to thank Fifth Hammer Brewing for providing us with delicious beer as we recorded this conversation. Real Talk with Women in the Music Industry, Part 2. Without further ado, let's dive in and start with the amazing co-host of this conversation, Mona Kayhan, who is a co-owner of the Bridge Studio here in Brooklyn and also has done some other amazing things in the industry. So Mona Kayhan, tell us a little more about yourself.
Thank you. First of all, so honored to be here. Thank you, Karen. Yeah, so I have a very cobbled together career history, like many of us do. I started out as a singer, actually. I tried out for Broadway shows. I actually got into one when I was a teenager and did a little tour with Donny Osmond with the show Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. So there I got the bug of performing, but also not just performing, just the whole package, just like being in a theater, being amongst musicians, musicians, performers, seeing the orchestra pit, seeing an audience. And my brain was always watching every move and trying to understand it. And show after show, which was exhilarating, I wanted more in a lot of ways. And I didn't know what that looked like. So my first gig in New York City was at an entertainment law firm, Grubman and Dursky and Schindler at the time. They represented everyone, Madonna to, Bruce Springsteen, to every big artist you could think of. Greeted them as a receptionist every single day that they came in. It was totally wild, and watched the back end of the music industry in every way, which was really interesting. And then I started doing event production, stage management, and then was really excited about just producing festivals and different, collaborations and events such as that. So I would sing on the side and then say, hey, let's do a Persian arts festival because my parents are from Iran. Let's do something cultural. New York City doesn't have anything like that. So my first year doing that in my 20s, I got a proclamation from the mayor of New York City at the time, Bloomberg, because our event was such a huge success and we brought attention to the Persian culture in New York, where most people think of, kebabs and, different Persian carpets. Instead, they understood there was poetry and beautiful music and ancient, just like storytelling and art and music and traditional music and then modern music. So that then got me a bigger bug of wanting to just make things happen. That kind of became my thing, which led me to Putumayo World Music, which was a record label in New York City, where I got to fall in love with bringing global artists to a platform. At the time, it was through CDs. That's long history now, but it was such a big deal to me to have a way to bring these incredible voices around the world to life, and have them have a stage, through these, CDs that everyone was buying tons of all around the world, like in the middle of a coffee shop in New Orleans. You can hear West African music because you bought it at the register, and that didn't exist before. So that's where I actually met Stephanie Meyers, which is so exciting. So I'll let her speak in a second, obviously. And
women connecting with women.
Will you? No.
Exactly. Long story short, I fell in love with my husband at the time, who was a producer, musician, engineer. And our little project studio in Red Hook was sold, and they said, you need to vacate in 30 days. And we had our huge car of a board in there, as well as a bunch of things that all of a sudden I said, how are we going to do this? How are we going to live? And then how are we, without that income, and then where are we going to put everything? So we threw everything into storage and had to kind of re-envision what our future was to be. And I said, you know what? I don't know how we're going to do it, but let's dream up our ultimate studio. I'll go in on it with you. I'll figure it out. I'll be the manager. You do the knob turning. And, he's an acoustician. He's like, I know how to build things, so I'll build it. And we designed it and came up with a business plan and came up with our ideas together with nothing in our bank accounts. We were broke because I also had quit one of my jobs at the time and was also soul searching. And all of a sudden we found a way to make the Bridge Studio happen. In 2018, we opened our doors, and then the rest is history. So now I work with indie artists. I work, obviously I do booking here, and it's been just a journey for sure. So it's been incredible to see it christened over time, over the years. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
So grateful to be here, Mona. Thank you. So grateful. Such a gorgeous space. So if you're watching this on YouTube, this is it. She did it. Yes, she rocked it. Stephanie Meyers, talk to us. And I have had the great pleasure of collaborating with you on a couple podcast episodes. So tell us a little bit about what you're all about.
What am I all about? Okay, so I guess I got my start in the music industry because I am a super fan. I love music. I had music pumping through the house as a kid, in the car with my dad, driving around. Always went through my veins. I became a deadhead at 15. So when I went to college undeclared and went to the counselor trying to figure out what the heck I should do, they said, "What do you love?" And I said, "Well, I love music." And they said, "Well, can you perform? Can you play?" I said, "No." So let's figure out how you can make a career out of doing what you love, so you're never working a day in your life, but you're working harder than ever. But it's for something that you love. So I started experimenting with music promotions. Started working for the local radio station. Got an internship when I went abroad to London, doing music promotions, and kind of realized, wow, I kind of made these things happen. I invited these people. I sent them the music. They came out. They wrote about it. Like, oh my God, what a high that was. That was really exciting. This is what I want to do. So right outside of college, I got married very young, and my husband and I settled in Philadelphia. And I met the owner of, I met the gentleman who was building a brand new music venue in Philadelphia called World Cafe Live. And I was his very first employee for World Cafe Live. And I was giving hard hat tours of the building. And then when we opened.
Some of you might recognize World Cafe from the NPR show,
yes,
which was kind of World Cafe Live. It was a big deal. I'm from Philly when that came.
But that was really, I got my first taste of live music and working in that venue and kind of doing the work and seeing the results firsthand and kind of helping to grow something, which was really exhilarating. And while I was there, because we were 7 days a week, we wanted to see how we could get as many different kind of audiences as we could in. So they wanted families. They would like, what if we did kid shows on the weekends? And we're like, well, that's interesting. So I started kind of researching local kids musicians and what's happening in the kids music scene. And the timing was just perfect because that's when kids music, the new kind of kids music scene was starting to happen. And I just kind of stepped into this world that I had no plans of going into. But since then, I've kind of been at the helm of the family music space in the PR side and booking. I moved from World Cafe Live after 3 years there to work for Putumayo World Music, where I met Mona. She was my first friend in New York City. We're actually having dinner after this to celebrate our 16-year anniversary.
Oh my gosh. A dinner to celebrate 16 years of friendship. That works for me.
So I got to work for Putumayo doing promotions and booking in specifically with kids. And then from there, I went to work for one of the greatest family musicians of our time, Dan Zanes, who is just an amazing human being and taught me so much. And I ran his label for 5 years. And then after I had my second daughter, I was ready to go off on my own, which I had been kind of wanting to do for a really long time, and it gave me the energy to, not the energy, but the motivation.
Kick in the butt.
So 7 years ago, I started my own company, Mayors Consulting, and I do PR and booking and management. I've always focused mostly in the family music space, but the last few years, I've been coloring outside the lines and working with some really unique artists, and kind of my whole mission statement is really just finding things that excite me, things that have unique stories, people that I think deserve to have themselves amplified and heard. And that's really what drives me to do what I do. And I absolutely love it.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And before this next amazing rock star introduces herself, I just want to call something out really quickly that always strikes me, which is the network of women. Of you two connecting at Putumayo, being friends 16 years later. And actually how I met Stephanie was I interviewed a woman who is a speech writing colleague of mine. So I'm a musician, but I've also run a communications business for about 10 years. And speech writing is one thing I do. And this woman, Felicity,
Yay,
is
Felicity.
a fellow speech. Shout out to Felicity. She is here in spirit, exactly. So Felicity was interviewed on She Rocked It for being a rock star speechwriter. And Stephanie watched it.
She's my neighbor. We live across the street from each other. I was like, what is this podcast? This should be my world, not yours.
And it became your world. It became your world. So that was a beautiful connection. Neighbors. And then Stephanie reached out, which was so great. And we have featured a couple amazing rock star women on your roster on the show, including Divinity Rocks, Nina Freelance, Sonia de los Santos, and hopefully more to come. And then after that, made the amazing connection with Mona. And Mona was part of our 2 events ago in Asbury Park live events. So I just want to point that out. This is what women do.
I will love to say, one of my favorite words in my bio is connector. And, a friend of mine just in my social life said to me the other day, she's like, you're just a connector. She's like, all the people I've been spending my time with, you brought me to. So I didn't realize that I do that. I just like to bring people together. I like to connect the dots, whether it's in my social life because I think, oh, you guys would be super cool together, or there's opportunities. But it makes so much happen, whether it's just creating friendships or creating business opportunities, whatever it might be. I think being a connector is a really important role that not a lot of people embrace as much as they should.
I think that's such an important point, and we have to keep that in our minds as a takeaway from this conversation. This conversation wouldn't happen here at the Bridge if it wasn't for you connecting me with Mona. That beautiful connection, goosebumps,
cool.
right? So this is what we have to do as women and as male allies too, making strong connections, supporting and empowering one another so that we all can rock it. Hey, Rockstar. I had to jump in for just a minute as you're hearing about the power of women connecting with women, because that is why we launched the Rockstar Network, our membership community for creative, courageous women. Go to our website, sherockedit.com, to learn more and join us on the inside. Inside the Rockstar Network, you'll have the opportunity to be part of podcast studio audiences so you can really hear a conversation like this in real time. You're going to get accountability, mentorship, and a community of rockstar women to root you on as you reach for your dreams. Check out the Rockstar Network today. So with that said, Teng.
Hi, everyone. My name is Teng Chen. I am currently a freelance audio engineer. So I am originally from Beijing, China. I moved to this country about 11 years ago to go to college at Peabody Institute of the Johns Hopkins University. I came here with a dream to become a classical pianist, and that's what I did. So for undergrad, I studied classical piano performance and recording arts, because I just always have an interest in, the technology side. I want to know what's behind the scenes, what's behind the TV, what's behind the record that I'm listening. So I was like, oh, that would be something good to know. And then ended up falling in love with it. But for my master's, I also did acoustic studies, which, it's kind of my backup plan, just in case this music career doesn't work out. And I did work as a acoustic consultant for 2 years, but the project that I was working on, it was mostly hospitals, office buildings. I did a couple MGM casino acoustic designs, and I realized over those 2 years that having an office job and drawing, putting things on paper, or reading, writing reports was not my thing, and I had to get back to music. So while I was still at school, and for a while after, I was focusing on classical music recording. I worked with the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra for a couple years. I worked with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. I work up at Banff Center up in Canada, doing their, the music recording projects. And after doing a couple years of that, I was like, okay, now I want to know something new. I want a new challenge. So I moved to New York City and became a freelance audio engineer. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I know probably 2 people at a time who are in New York City. And I just have this really stubborn idea that I'm going to make it at the hardest place on earth, maybe. So I just started hustling and, going out and meet people. And then somehow it all just started to happen. In 2018, I got this call from an engineer from Saturday Night Live. He's like, hey, you want to work for us? And I was like, yeah, of course. So I started working at Saturday Night Live in 2018, and that kind of just opened up a lot of doors for me. So right now, my career is kind of split between TV world and studio world, and freelance projects such as She Rocked It. I call it passion projects. So for TV, I work at SNL as a pre-record music editor and mixer. I work directly with the music director and music supervisor, preparing music for, all the pre-record elements of music. I also travel the country working on TV specials like the Grammys, VMAs, Super Bowl, What else?
A few small
few
shows.
small things,
A couple small little casual
and somehow
shows.
I got
you know.
involved in spelling bee last year.
That's cool.
I know. I was
Fancy.
like, oh, that's something new. And for on the studio side, right now I'm mostly at Power Station. So that's what I do. I'm just trying to not put myself in a box and do a little bit of everything. And
Give it up for
try to
Teng.
challenge
Come on
myself
now.
every day.
Come on now.
Thank you.
And we did actually feature Teng on season 1 of our podcast, where you'll hear more about her incredible story, her journey. So don't miss that episode. It's fabulous.
So my name's Rashida Scott-Cruz. I teach music industry at Monmouth University's Department of Music and Theater Arts. I've been teaching there since 2016. Since then, the university has received Billboard Top Music Business School in 2020 and 2022. I executive produce Monmouth Artists for Diversity and Inclusion, which is a social justice album. You can find that on Spotify or all streaming platforms. It's Blue Hawk Records presents Maddie, Volume 1. And that also received recognition from the governor and the state of New Jersey, where we received a gubernatorial and a proclamation of state from the state of New Jersey.
Give it up. Come on with this.
And I am also a champion of women of music in the industry. As we have heard Karen say, the statistics are quite alarming considering all the wonderful things that women contribute to the business of music. So I'm honored to be here, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Rashida. We need professors like you in this industry guiding the way for that next generation. We're going to hear more about that. Thank you all so much for sharing and allowing us a little glimpse into your journeys. I know that's probably a small glimpse, but it blew my mind just to hear those stories. And you know, we know from the statistics, as you were saying, that the music business is not particularly hospitable to women. It's not, women are a very small minority. So I want to ask you all, what gave you the courage, and all of you can answer, whoever feels called to answer, what gave you the courage to dive wholeheartedly, like full time, into the music business versus viewing music more as like a side thing or a hobby or like a, thing like that, or going into something safe and making music like your moonlighting thing? Like, what gave you the courage to make it your life's work? Talk to us about courage.
So I guess I'll start. I mean, for me, I was always inspired by supervision or music supervision. So that's sound for film and visual media. And when I learned in high school the stats for women in competition to composers like Hans Zimmer and John Williams, there was really not a lot of representation of women composers in the industry. So unfortunately, I pivoted, but I did take on some projects as a music supervisor. I work with a company called Radio Vision Films. So that was my introduction into the music business that got me to where I am today.
You said, I'm going to make this better. Right? This is chaos.
Yeah, it was a mess.
Right? That's really interesting. Anyone else want to talk about what gave you the courage to wholeheartedly do the music thing?
I would like to give a shout out to my family back in China, because I think I wouldn't be anywhere without their support. So yeah, there was no musicians in my family. My grandparents, they're both factory workers. My dad had some vocal training when he was young, but back then, you cannot have a career as a musician. It was just, the Communist Party has just taken over for 30 years, and people are starving, let alone, being a musician. So my dad was a musical person. My mom was an entrepreneur, and luckily they're very open-minded people. So they wanted to give me some kind of musical training. So I started playing the piano when I was 3 years old. Had some vocal training when I started my vocal training when I was 8 years old. So that's all I know when I was a kid is music. And I remember that was the thing that brings me the most joy. Probably the only thing that brings me joy. So when I was 13 years old, I was like, I want to become a musician. And my family was in shock. They're like, oh gosh, how are you going to make a living? We don't know how to support you because we don't know any musicians. Your piano teacher is the only person we know who plays music. And And then somehow they're like, okay, if you do decide to pursue this dream, we'll support you however we can. And I did some research, and I told them that I want to come to America to study music. And they're like, okay, we'll give you all the support you need. So they sent me on a plane, and I came over.
Wow.
So yeah, I think it's definitely my family.
Goosebumps upon goosebumps. Okay.
I think mine was I went full force in the other direction first and then realized how miserable I was. I'm sure that's resonant for others, but I actually in college was pre-med. Iranian culture, it's like going into anything like this, music, anything is like crazy as well. And terrifies one's parents to no end. So but I pursued pre-med and music at the same time, and I studied ethnomusicology, and I lived in West Africa during college while taking all my prerequisites for med school. So wanted to keep learning about music at the same time. But then after graduating, fell in love with music, of course. After graduating, even was getting ready to take the MCATs, got a job at University of Chicago at an endocrinology lab in the hospital. I remember thinking you have to put on all the sterile stuff when you go to the mice caves of under the hospitals where they're all, living and breeding. And I just remember going into the hallway, and it was very echoey. The hallways were, the stairwell. And the kind of echo as a singer where you sing and it just like reverberates through like multiple floors. And I just remember like singing like my favorite song just to like make myself feel better. And I think that's what really had me realize I kept going back to, God, I don't want to be doing this. I even to the point where I went and sat on my MCATs, studied for 3 months, doing one of those test prep classes. So you're studying like 8 hours a day. And in the first section, I started, furiously going through the section, and then I stopped mid-section, which you can't do or you're screwed. If you stop for a second in these 5-hour tests, you lose 2 minutes of time. You're really done. Once you stop, you're like, oh, I'm now behind. And then I realized I'm stopping because I don't want to do this. And I put my pencil down, and you can't just walk out of a test because there's other people taking tests. You'll disrupt them. So I had to wait for 45 minutes to be respectful. And I was just like looking around. I was like, all these guys are going to be doctors. I am not going to be a doctor. And I know that it's going to be in music. I have to follow something else. This is not who I am. And then after the section finally finished, I handed in my test. I said, I'm not going to be continuing. And the lady was like, are you sure? I was like, I'm very sure. I handed in the test and then walked out. So I think those moments you try something and you're just like, this is not me. And it makes you realize what you want, Yeah.
Wow, that is a true light bulb moment. And Stephanie, I want to hear your story on this, but what that strikes me as like one of those major like life pivot moments of like, my life is not going to go this direction. I'm very clear that's going to go another direction. And both you and Stephanie, and what I heard in your story was that you both had this kind of pivot moment where you wanted to do your own business, like have your own shingle, right? You worked in labels, you did different things. And Stephanie, you were kind of like working for other folks and doing these other projects, but like, tell me kind of what gave you the courage to go out on your own with your own consulting company.
I was always doing bits and pieces on the side. Even when I was working for other labels and other artists, I was still taking on little baby PR projects on the side because I would meet these people that I thought were so incredible, and I really wanted to help them. I wanted to help them get their music out there. I wanted to share their story. Did it become a little problematic, overstepping in between things? Maybe.
Mark of a true entrepreneur.
And when, so I also had this other project that I was doing when I was still working at Putumayo and for Dan Zanes is this conference called Kindie Fest, which is basically like a South by Southwest for the kids' music space. So I was a founder of this with Bill Childs and another partner, and we grew this for years and years, and it became this huge event. Mona came on as a partner, and it was the time where I got to do what I wanted to do, as opposed to selling the message and what I was being told to do. And so it was as big as I dreamed it. And I think I just really wanted the chance to work with the things that I was choosing and go with my gut. My biggest thing is going with my gut, is one of my two big things. And I've learned time and time again that if I don't go with my gut, I'm going to end up paying for it. And when I do go with my gut, even if it doesn't end up the way I think it's going to go, it's rewarding in a whole other sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think that idea of like, taking the reins and being able to kind of make your own destiny is incredibly liberating.
One of the most beautiful gifts I was given was from Dan. It wasn't going to work for him. It wasn't going to work for me anymore to keep up what we had. But I was like, well, I've always wanted to do my own. I've always wanted to do my own PR firm. How about you be my first client? I'll do PR. You hire somebody else to do the other stuff that I was doing for you. And I launched Mayors Consulting with Dan Zanes as my first client. And that's what happened. And it was a beautiful thing. And it was instant street cred and, sterling reputation and a wonderful, a wonderful shaking of hands and parting ways, but in a really lovely way.
That's great, and it worked out great for both of you. Really.
It did. It really did.
Everyone wins. I love that so much.
That was good. But yeah, you gotta know your limits, and you gotta know when it's time, and you gotta speak up for yourself. And I think it takes time to get to that point. I did not always draw the line or say no. Saying no. No, this is one of my other favorite things. No is the best word in the world. It's the most liberating word. But yeah, knowing your limits and moving on when it's time to move on.
By the way, I love being able to interview you, Stephanie, because I feel like you're always setting up interviews for other folks. So it's so great to put you in the hot seat. Thank you.
I'm a behind-the-scenes gal.
I love it.
That's
being a former publicist myself, it's great to get to interview a publicist. So we got to be real with the fact that we talked about some of these stats in the industry, and there's been. The METOO movement brought up a lot of ugliness in the industry and across the entertainment industry. So I'm curious to hear from each of you. Maybe you each could tell us in like a few minutes. I'd love to hear from each of you. Like, what is the climate like today in the music business? Like as of today, given some of the awakenings and changes that have hopefully happened over the past couple of years. Like, what in your experience is the climate like right now? Yeah, go ahead.
Sure, I guess I'll start because I have the lowest stat under my category. So right now, I feel very fortunate that my working environment has improved a lot. Just for example, Power Station, I think we're split between half men and half women, and half of us are on green card or on some kind of visa.
And Power Station, just to clarify, is a recording studio, right?
Yes, it's a recording studio.
In New York.
In New York, yeah.
Cool.
Right now it's owned by Berkeley College, but it's been around since the 1977. So yeah, it's a huge change. I cannot express how better it feels because since I started my career about 10 years ago, I've always been the only woman in any place that I worked. It's really strange. It's whether it's in classical recording or jazz, which is probably one of the most male-dominated field, or just live sound. Live sound is probably even worse, I would say. And TV, oh gosh, TV is a traditionally white male dominated industry and still is. I mean, I'm the only Asian woman immigrant at SNL for as long as I know. And that needs to change. I mean, it's really just from working at these different environments and cultures, I do feel the difference of having a balanced gender and have a diverse group, what it brings to the team and what it brings to the whole culture and how much it elevates each other and also how much the client will benefit from that as well.
How have you stood your ground in environments where you are the only woman again and again?
I guess, well, what I've been telling myself is that they can put you down because you're a woman, but they can't put you down if you do good work. So I've just always tried to do good work, and my work will speak for itself. And that's it.
Thank you,
And
Teng.
ignore all the noises, because people will try to put you down whenever they can, and you can't let them get to you.
Great advice. Who else wants to give us a pulse of the industry?
I'll add to that too. I think for myself, I'm the only person of color in my department and have been. I mean, Monmouth University is going through a transition and integrating diversity from the top down, and it takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. We only just recently removed the Woodrow Wilson Monument, which stood for racism in a lot of different ways. So we have a long ways to go, but I'm excited to champion. And as she said, it's your work, it speaks for itself.
And just to follow up on that, Rashida, thank you for that. You, as a professor, are seeing the next generation, right, coming up in the music industry and helping to educate them. So what is the pulse of that generation? Because I know you're working with a lot of women.
Well, it's wonderful because we employ our students through our student-led record label. Blue Hawk Records is a label that the students are able to perform, create their own content, produce, market. Everything that has to be done to get an album pushed out, they do it through the student-led record label. We have so many female artists with strong personalities that I just think that's what's going to sustain them in this business and the way that they have to navigate themselves. I also encourage students to start their own businesses. So if you're going into the music industry, there's a lot of exploitation that happens, whether it be through record labels, producers, people who just want to collaborate. So I make sure that they understand the importance of retaining their copyrights, their trademarks, making sure that they sign up with the performance rights organizations of their choice so that they can receive their royalties for any compensation. And I also encourage them to start their own publishing companies because 50% of the publishing is what you would share with a potential company. So if they are to do business with a organization, they would be able to retain 50% of their publishing instead of, divulging all of their compensation. And I also go over other strategic ways in which they can kind of create their own institution, join a union, whether it's SAG-AFTRA or American Music Federation, or, just make sure that they do things like this, attend different events and collaborate with other individuals. And I think that's really been helpful to help them navigate this industry today.
That's amazing. Give it up for Rashida. Come on. Amazing. I just have to make a little anecdote because my dad's in the house. I remember when I was starting out as a musician and finding my way, he would say, isn't there like a school you can go to figure this out? And he's a physician and you go to med school and you kind of have a roadmap. And I was like, I don't think so. Does anyone know of one? And Rashida is creating this program that I wish I had back in the day, 15 years ago. I had to find the legal help. I was going to volunteer law. All these things. So I just want to say thank you. I wish I knew you when, and it's such a blessing that this next generation is going to learn from you. So kudos, really.
Thank you.
It's awesome. Ladies, why don't you give us your perspective on kind of the state of the industry as a woman?
Gosh, it's so funny because I'm not sure if where I'm at is age and experience and giving less, what's. Or, I'm sure it's a combination of that and the progress that we've been making.
Mm-hmm.
But when my first job in the music industry was in a live music venue. I was in my mid-20s. I was a newlywed. It was a pretty toxic environment. I was very eager. I really wanted to please. It was, celebrities and musicians and late nights. And it wasn't the coziest of environments. There were a lot of things about it that really turned me off and sent me home at night feeling gross.
Yeah, let's be real about that and call it out.
Yeah, no, it was real.
I agree.
There were, because I was, had my position, maybe I was sleeping with the boss. And, I had to hear secondhand that people were saying these things and go into work and still do my job, knowing that people were saying, horrible things about me or just, being hit on, just whatever, the usual stuff, but it's a music venue and you're in your 20s and whatever, it's the way it was. Mm-hmm. So as much as I loved the kids world that I went to, and part of the reason that I leaned into it was because when we were doing these Saturday shows, I'm watching these kids bouncing. I'm just watching, smiling. I'm feeling comfortable and happy. And wow, what a much more cozy space that felt to be. So I went that way, and I went that way for a long time. And I made that my whole universe and became an expert at it. And I love it. And there in that space, I was in control and I was an authority. And I felt really great there. Now, 20 years later, screw all that. Now I'm like, you know what? Okay. Yes, this is my world. Yes, I own, what I own here, and I feel really great about it. I'm ready to dip back in and do some other things and, step back outside of that safe zone that I created for myself. I remember being on the road with a band, and having a horrible experience and just wanting to call my daddy and put me on a plane and take me home. But no, I had to drive the band back to the airport and fly with them and subject myself to everything I was being subjected to. And I just, there's times when you just want to quit and run and, put your head under the covers. But you can't because you don't want to look any weaker than you already feel, So I'm glad to have, I haven't felt that way in a very, very long time. And I'm happy to have those days behind me, and I don't plan to let that happen. And now I think I have a much stronger voice. Should anything like that happen again, I would tell these people exactly what they could do, So I think a lot of it is maturity and journey. But I'm sure there's women now that are in their 20s that wouldn't put up with half the crap that I did.
Thank you for sharing that, honestly. I really appreciate it. As a musician myself who has experienced really gross behaviors from men over the years, I will be honest with you that it actually did detour me for a long time towards my communications career, where I felt like I was much more respected for my mind, better compensated, all the things, wasn't judged on my appearance as much. And I'm ready to dip my toe back, because I feel like it's safer. I'm ready to raise my voice again and sing again. So I'm with you on that. And here's hoping, as we all come maybe back to it, or you all have been in it, and we collectively raise our voices, that we will raise these numbers up in the study. And because there's such a lack of women's voices being heard in all these ways, whether you're a producer, songwriter, performing artists, in the studio, we're not getting art that represents women's voices, or art that's produced by women, engineered by women, or things taught by women. So, but you're all fighting the good fight. So that's beautiful. So Mona, give us a taste, because with the stats were also
oh my goodness,
not so pretty.
Yeah, I have a similar journey, I think, to Stephanie. I felt like I was always lifting up other men, and I was doing all of these things, but then it was for, a man. But at the same time, I was like, what am I doing this for? I'm raising other people's businesses up from the ground and just, breaking my back, right? And so when I realized there was an opportunity for me to finally have something, again, it is with my husband, and he will be the first. I wish he were here. He would have loved to be, but he'll be the first to say, she's the boss. Anyone, if I'm in the state,
she's a keeper.
The boss, and he knows, he's dealing with, whatever it is, paperwork, money, she's the best. She's the one, and then I can actually put my stake in the ground in something and say, I'm a part of this from the ground up, and it feels so much better than raising someone else's idea. And so, yeah, most people don't look at me and say, they don't think I'm an owner, right? They think, oh, do you work here? And that's okay, and it makes me proud that I can say I'm actually an owner. And I think the vast majority of people say, oh, really? They're surprised. And that makes me happy, that I can actually help build that story for someone's, thought process to be like, oh, yeah, there can be female owners of recording studios. That's great. It's nice. It feels good. And it's nice to do something for myself for once. Yeah.
I love that. I love that idea of changing people's perceptions too in real time. But I want to continue that thread, Mona, that you just said about people having that awareness moment when they're like, oh, you're an owner. Oh, that's cool. So I want to leave with something that we can do, all of us listening. What can we do to change this conversation? What can we do to make the music industry more and more welcoming and supportive for all? Big question.
Hire more women and have more women at a decision-making position, I guess. It cannot just be interns or, PAs. It has to be people who are making decisions, who are giving orders. And because, at the position that I am at, a lot of shows or institutions that I work for, the people giving me orders or telling me what to do are still men. And I wish there are more women, and that will change a lot.
True. It needs to be women in all positions.
Yes.
Behind the mixing board, mastering, front and back, everywhere. We really, the boys club thing is intimidating.
Yeah.
It's really intimidating.
intimidating.
Especially when I first started, I felt so small. And I still do sometimes. You
Look at the percentages.
You walk into an event and it's, a bunch of, suits that, they kind of all have, the little thing. It's not always the most welcoming. It should be welcoming. It's music. The whole point of music is to bring people together, right? We're supposed to gather. We're supposed to be an audience. We're supposed to champion. I think it should be that, energy from all aspects of it.
Rashida, tell us. Give us some hope.
So,
is this happening? Are we going to have more women decision makers
yes,
coming?
Yes, it's happening every day. It's happening whether, listen, we are always going to have systemic racism. We're always going to have our own opinions and things of that nature. At the end of the day, it's us supporting each other, understanding that we have share the same common goal. We all want to hear good music. But even beyond that, we all want to be good human beings to one another, right? So, your tribe may not be the people you think they are, right? Your family, your friends, they may not be 100% supportive. But there are people out there, people like you, who took the time to come out here and spend the day with us and just hear our perspectives. And I think us having that support of one another, refer each other. As She Rocked It has wanted to expand her brand, I put her in contact with She Is the Music. Michelle Ruski runs She Is the Music project, also in collaboration with Alicia Keys. And so, just putting the referrals out there, supporting one another, whether you're male or female, will help move us forward.
Totally.
I have one thing.
Absolutely.
It's funny because this event helped revive this idea that was just a little baby seed before. And I have a few amazing indie friends of mine, artists that are in this room that have also sparked this for me. But I'd love to open up our space, at least at the Bridge, every so often, maybe once a month, for a co-working session for women artists to come together and share knowledge, bring out their laptops. Okay, how do you put your music on Instagram Reels because the library is really limited? How do you get it on? Like things like that where everyone's just like struggling to search things on their own. Like, why not search together? And like, oh, I actually did that last week. Let me help you do that. Okay, great.
I love those ideas. And I love that you were brave enough to share these ideas being born with us. That is so cool. That's how it happens. When you just verbalize it and put it into the world, it's truly the first magical step. As you all know, if you've been watching She Rocked It, I always like to end with our 1 tips to rock it. We'll have like a little lightning round. All you rock stars, if you could each share your 1 tip to rock it, because clearly they are rocking it, what 1 tip would you leave with all of us?
I would say bet on yourself, just the way you get up and go to work for somebody else. If you in your heart feel that you're capable of doing something, get out of your own way. Stop allowing your subconscious to talk you out of it with fear, doubt, and worry, and do the damn thing.
Mic drop. Yes.
Well, that was hard to follow. I always tell myself you wouldn't get what you don't ask for.
Never hurts to ask.
There you go.
Good
Never
minds
hurts
think
to
alike.
ask.
Yes.
The worst thing somebody can say is no.
No. Exactly. So I always ask whether it's, negotiating rent or negotiating my rate or, anything or getting a job. You want to hire me? Would you like to do something together? I ask questions all the time. And I think that's probably one of the reasons that got me this far.
Yeah. Yeah. I have 3 business pillars.
Love it.
Never hurts to ask, because the worst thing someone can say is no, which is just so true. No one's going to come offer you the thing that you're wanting and scheming and dreaming. You got to go out there and verbalize it and ask for it. And God, you could just make something happen.
Just like Mona just said her dreams. Now
Right?
the stuff's gonna happen.
So which segues into, so no, if they say no, for me, no is like the most empowering word ever. Someone will come to me with something and it'll stress me out and I'll anxiety and then picture myself doing this. And then the second I say no, it all goes away. So knowing when to say no.
I would say, my gosh, that subconscious that Rashida was talking about, I think that is so key for me. And I feel like for me, we have a history of failures. All of us have our failures. So I sometimes when one can get really stuck, I think that's what I do is I get stuck on those past subconscious sort of thoughts and realizing, no, those are actually part of what makes me special and who I am, and kind of embracing all of that side of oneself is, I think, the key to finding your special sauce, in life and what you're here for, right? Your purpose. So yeah, I would say that's it.
Wow.
I remember my other one.
What's the other one?
I said it in the top of it. It was going with your gut, which just will lead you on the right path. Just always go with your gut. Take risks, but go with your gut.
I love that. And if I can just add one tip, I just want to say, because I'm a musician, obviously, communications writer, but building She Rocked It has required me to overcome a lot of resistance, actually. Some people think that, I'm doing this thing and it's easy, I'm passionate for it, but there's been many times when I had to psych myself up because it's a very big, bold vision. Just like being a woman who's among very few in the industry is very bold. It takes a lot of courage. So what I would just say to anyone in any industry, especially in the creative world, if you have a big, bold vision, you have to kind of overcome that resistance. There's a lot of ways you can do that, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's a book like The War of Art, whether it's having other rock star entrepreneurs in your life who root for you, find that community, whether you're blessed to have a family who cheers for you, but know that there will be resistance. And if you have it, it's not meaning you need to stop. It just means that you need to acknowledge it. If you really want to do this thing, find a way to overcome it. And that might be unique to you. But know that it's there and don't let it push you down. So that's what I will add. And I want to give one last round of applause for this brave, badass group of rock stars. Come on. May the future of music be brighter thanks to all of you. Truly. Thanks so much for tuning into the She Rocked It podcast. I'm your host, Karen Gross. This episode has been edited by Aaron Phelan and produced by Tori Marchioni, with audio engineering by Teng Chen. The She Rocked It theme song is by Karen Gross and Tim Motzer. Visit our Instagram page at She Rocked It to join the conversation, and visit our website, sherockedit.com, to learn about how you can join our Rockstar Network membership community, support our work, and attend our live events and podcast tapings. Hope to see you on the inside.